Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? And we are live. Welcome to our channel, Philosapiens, where we critically examine the claims and concepts of religions. All right, today we have, of course, as you can see, we have 23 years is the title basically. And this is a coincidence basically. And what we wanted to
As
do,
you can see, we have
uh,
23 years
is the title basically. All right, I'm getting a feedback from my own. I want to
Yeah.
remove this basically, first thing first. So we decided to do this just because of the coincidence of 23 years of prophethood and then the 23 years of the anniversary of 9/11. But what we really wanted to talk here was not about anything else but the rise of new atheism because of this one dividing incident in history, basically at the very cusp of 21st century, pretty much, right? So, yeah, with me is Martin as always. And Martin, how are you doing? This is gonna be a different stream because we just on spontaneously decided that we're gonna do it. We are not sure what we're gonna talk about. What we were thinking was to get the guests on stream and have a conversation with them and maybe see what they think about this new atheist movement that has arisen after um, off of this incident, basically. So, welcome, Madin. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How you doing?
Good, good. So, yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna uh, make the link public, and anybody who wants to join and share their thoughts, basically what they think uh, about this new atheist movement, uh, they're welcome to join and have a conversation.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think what. Let me ask you, Madin, what's your memory of 9/11? By the way.
Um, well, when I say memory, it was such a long time ago. I don't recall every fine detail, but I was a young kid, and so that kind of gives away my age maybe a little bit. I think there's no confusion around that though. Really, don't think anybody thinks I'm like 70 years old. But I was a very young kid at the time, and I remember watching these two towers, two buildings, being a blazing inferno on live air, and I was just not aware of what's going on. I just thought this seemed to be a momentous occasion or something that seemed everybody seemed to be preoccupied with, but never seen anything like it. But I wasn't terribly shocked either. I had no clue about concept of terrorism. I had no really clue about Islam being indicted in these sort of situations, implicated in these sort of situations. And then I heard this name, Osama bin Laden, being expressed on TV, and I was like, all right, so they're saying some guy called Osama bin. I had no concept of race relations or Islamophobia or Muslimophobia. I had no concept of these things, right? I don't think I was subjected to racism even prior to like that. So returning to, let's say, school the next day, realistically, there was no real uproar other than the fact that some people were saying that it was this Arabian man or Islamic man and so on. But that's kind of the first time I've saw like a jolt of concern among around Muslims, or Muslims seem to be in the limelight. Now, clearly, I was young, and I might not have been aware of the fact that Muslims may have been part of the media headlines prior to that, but I don't remember it. I had no memory of it. So this is the first time that kind of animus kind of seeped in, where there was a lot of headlining and a lot of hot stories regarding and people, students, children. Remember, I was a kid talking about um, Arabs or Islamic people or Pakistanis or whatever you want to call it. They tend to be they're violent and they're attacking these countries, and the word terrorism was perhaps used. I did not see it a lot. I'll be honest. My general my my I remember my school years. It was generally good. not everybody said it. It wasn't this massive sort of segregation between white people or non-Muslims and Muslims, nothing like that. But there was a little bit of teasing and so on. But I do remember that was the turning point for this to come into in my mind, all of this conversation to come into the public limelight. All of a sudden on TV, discussions started evolving. All of a sudden, on radio, are Muslims violent? Does the Quran teach violence? Does the Quran teach, for example, the killing and slaughtering of innocent women and children? Was it inspired by Islam, and or are Muslims secretly soliciting this or funding this or wanting this to happen, desiring this? Is this some sort of grand mission that all of this started slowly in the next 4 years fermenting? I remember that. And yeah, that's my memory of it, and that my memory kind of ends on it as well, with the eventual um, execution of Osama bin Laden. My memory also is entangled with conspiracy theories, people denying that 9/11 was a real attack by this particular Islamic extremist group, allegedly inspired by Islam, etc., a jihadi movement, that Al Qaeda was invented, that Osama bin Laden was a CIA operative. These are what my memories concern, and in the middle of all of this, there was this massive kind of conspiracy movement where whether or not Osama bin Laden's dead already or not, or whether he's just hiding in an island, and then eventually he gets caught, and then it kind of simmers down. After that, the ISIS stuff came along, and we kind of quickly, I won't say forgotten about it, but we put it on the shelf. We put the book away, and now we have the new terrorist figureheads that we're after. But that was the first time I even understood what terrorism was. But yeah, that's my memory.
Right. Madin, just wanted to pause you for a second and put this very strong disclaimer here, basically. This stream is not meant to criticize or, point a finger at any particular community as such. You all guys know the backgrounds that all of us have here. So that's not the point here. It's just evaluating one event that has taken about 23 years uh, ago, and then the prophetic life of 23 years of Prophet Muhammad. It was just a coincidence that just struck in our minds, and we thought, okay, let's talk about this event that changed the history in quite some ways, basically. And even I remember when this happened, I was just about to go to university, so now I have given my age as well, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, I saw that there was something running on the TV, and then I said, oh, what is this? Is this some accident kind of, and then it seemed like that the first tower, basically the north tower, was struck. And then at the time, the whole of media was probably speculating that this is somehow an accident or something like that. But then slowly it became apparent that their thoughts were divided at the same time, that no, there's something else going on, probably because there are other flights that they haven't been able to contact and all those things. And then all of a sudden things changed pretty quickly, basically, right? And when you come from a background which is in a foreign land, you are seen differently, pretty much, right? And so yeah, anybody who looked different was kind of for a brief time. And this is probably something you can say that it's not uncommon to have a kind of a xenophobic feeling that you could see on somebody else's face, basically. The people who were native to Americas, pretty much, right? So yeah, that's my memory as well, pretty much. So yeah, the whole incident, the point that we wanted to discuss here was what happened afterwards. Basically, everybody, those the atheists who were probably closeted at that point, or not so closeted. Basically, I'm talking about the new atheist movement started by Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Dan Dennett, and Christopher Hitchens. Basically, they sprung into action pretty much after that, and they started saying, "Oh, all religions are bad. All religions are bad," and we should abolish religions and all those things. And that rhetoric started to, just pump in the public sphere pretty heavily, right? And blaming this attack onto the religious fundamentalism, exposing the religious fundamentalism pretty much at that time. So yeah, that was one of the things that started this movement. And then a lot of the people from Muslim communities as well started to have a voice, basically. I remember just immediately after 9/11, uh, I met Salman Rushdie. I think I have spoken about that quite a few times, basically, right? And from that point on, I think I always had this thing that, and by the time I was already out of religion, basically, right? And I was already an atheist by that time. But what propelled me into doing more and more research into Islam was my meeting with him, basically. And then I started reading, and I said, no, I mean, no religious book can teach all these things, or it can't have violence and all. But to my dismay, there was some things, and at the time, I hadn't even read Satanic Verses, basically, that book. And I knew about that book for quite a long time, but for some reason, I just didn't want to read it. But after I met him, and then I said, okay, now this first thing first, I need to read the scriptures first properly and with proper understanding. Once I did that, then I was ready to go and read the Satanic Verses. So, as a literary work, that seemed out to be not a great book, but it stirred quite some feathers, pretty much. It ruffled quite some feathers, pretty much. And if anyone has read that book, they can understand why. So yeah, I mean, that's how I think things started. And as Madan said, I think by 2010, 2011, I had encountered Madan and quite a few guys who had the similar thinking as mine, uh, and we were active, against kind of, you know, at least exposing problems within religions, in particular Islam. From our perspective, Madan and I were opposed to this scientific miracles claims within Quran. We used to expose a couple of apologists on that, and yes, and after probably 8 9 years after that, we decided we're gonna do something and open up a channel, and here we are. So yeah, I mean, I've skipped quite a few things in between, but that's kind of the basically summary of it after 9/11, with the 23 years of our prophetic career, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
Madan, uh,
go on.
what I'm gonna do, Madan, sorry, before you jump in, what I'm gonna say is, right now we don't have anybody listening. That was quite expected, probably. So maybe the thumbnail is not up to the mark,
Mm.
as you suggested. But if anybody is listening, if anybody joins and they want to jump in, maybe express their thoughts on the whole movement, atheist movement that sprung after the new atheist movement. Maybe they can share their thoughts. Madan.
Yeah, I mean, regarding this event, I was in America actually when this just before this happened. I think it was in 2001. Am I
Right.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I
September.
was actually in America in between August, between June, July. It's summer holidays, the 6 week summer holidays. So either between July and August. Yeah, July and August. I think I did my birthday in America. So it seemed as though, and guess what? I traveled from JFK Airport. So we went to New York, and from New York, I came back to my home in England. So I was there in 2001, maybe 3 to 4 weeks before, maybe less, because I remember it was very much into the year of my school when it started and commenced. School commenced in September. So school just commenced. And when I say commenced, I mean maybe it was just a week because school starts in September and beginning of September. So, and obviously this happened on the 11th. So this was just a couple of weeks in, maybe 1 week into school, and I just came back from America. I just came back from New York City. Right, I so if I was just delayed by a couple, I don't know what would have happened because we're talking about a counterfactual situation that if you're a philosopher who's a determinist who may not be able to speculate or conjecture because it doesn't make a lot of sense to do so. What would have happened if I had been there? Maybe the butterfly effect would have been so that I would have stopped the terrorists from attacking.
Yeah,
My atoms would have caused some sort of change in the configuration of the air
maybe.
pressure and changed something. Small events leads to large scale differences, and the
Yeah,
whole course
right,
of
right.
history would have been
The
different. I don't know,
what
but
is that butterfly effect is caused
butterfly.
by
Yes,
causes La Nina or El
yes.
Nino?
Sorry,
La Nina. Butterfly effect causes La Nina, right? Or El Nino? El Nino.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. El Nino.
No, you mentioned butterfly effect, right? So
Yeah,
a flapping of the butterfly's
yeah.
wings causes El Nino or La Nina or something like that, like really
Okay.
large scale storms and stuff,
Yes,
basically.
yes, yes, yes,
All
yes.
right.
Yeah, the whole point is that small changes to the cosmos can have extremely system altering effects on the grand scheme of things, affecting everything and ultimately changing the course of history, changing the course of everything.
Right,
So,
right.
so I can't speculate exactly what would have happened, but I did miss out on it. I guess I wasn't in New York by just a couple of days. Um, but yeah, it was like a massive launch pad or springboard into the limelight of Islam, Muslims, the Muslim community, and the intensive pressure that was put on from the media, surge of media interest all of a sudden, and finally legislation. It led to the Patriot Act, and then political affairs on an international scale. You could say the instigation of going into Afghanistan and then eventually Iraq. The groundwork was laid down after 9/11. It was fueled by 9/11. The kind of paranoia, the kind of
The excess of evil, basically,
yes,
and
yes,
all those things,
and
basically.
and
These all these terms, yeah,
and the war on terror, and the war on terror, right? The
and the war
war on terror was, um, pretty much given
was
birth
not
to.
as prominent. Yeah, wasn't as prominent before 9/11, but then after 9/11, it became, one of the biggest, what do you call the mottos of American government, pretty much in the sense. Um,
Yeah,
Anybody who talk, and that was the time George W. Bush was in presidency, basically, right?
yeah,
And I remember he couldn't say the word nuclear, right? Nuclear. So he spoke of it very funnily, probably. But any case, yeah, I mean that was the dividing point, I think. And all these wars that took over, I think, I did question at that time as well, the war on Iraq. To some extent, Afghanistan war seemed like kind of a retaliation to what happened. But
mhm,
even at that time, I was thinking to myself that war on Iraq somehow it doesn't you know gel in with my thoughts, pretty much, right? I felt that even though, I mean, there were things they were saying that WMDs are there and all those things, but it
mhm.
just didn't seem right to me, that thing. And eventually, that's what happened. Basically, I mean, that
Yeah,
destroyed
yeah,
the whole country, pretty much, right?
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, this is in my memory. In my memory, there was. I don't remember being being in the spotlight in any meaningful sense, or Islam being in the spotlight in any meaningful sense until after 9/11, and after 9/11, the relentless discussions and political focus and media focus was saturated. The media was saturated with this sort of stuff, and anything Islam. That is what unleashed the kind of um, anti-Muslim sort of focus on in the media. Whether it's called Islamophobia or not, that's up to debate. So obviously, there's certain issues that rightfully sometimes get exposed under the banner of the prescribed behavior, or if not Islamically prescribed, then there's Muslims who do things that are grossly, even within the Muslim community, Islamic community, will grossly be a violation of Islam and violation of maybe human rights. A lot of that just came into existence. I mean, there's so much data on this as well, some academic research, that the volume of anti-Islamic and/or Islamic critical narratives and media discussions and academic sort of commentary and research that just was unleashed was unparalleled prior to that moment. And even if you, when you look at in terms of the data of what the focus of terrorism was prior to 9/11, I mean, the countries that were most were of the top tier leagues for terrorism, for the production of terrorism, for engagements in terrorism, and so on, were not in the Middle East, at least. It was, I suspect, if I remember carefully, Colombia and India, and so on, and maybe even the Republic of Ireland, a little bit less down. But the 90s were dominated by those countries were known for terrorism. Colombia, as you know, was a massive lot of corruption. There's a drug that still is, I
Drug
suppose.
mafia, drug
Yeah,
mafia.
yeah. If you
Pakistan has
yeah,
a huge presence of tourism, right? And Afghanistan probably less so, but
yeah.
yes, somewhat.
Well,
But
I mean, after 9/11, concurrent with or just after the Iraq War, maybe even Afghanistan, there was a massive shift in the number of terrorist attacks that we were seeing, where Colombia, India, etc., were outstripped by places of the Middle East, including Afghanistan and Pakistan, and so on. The number of terrorism attacks happening in the Middle Eastern soil, basically, that took the top of the leaderboard, right? What the explanation can be behind that is I don't know. It correlates with the post 9/11 events, basically, and in other words, you could say there was this kind of war on Islam, and that ratcheted up, a lot of recruits and changed the zone of war, and it's expected and not, unsurprising that the Middle East then we would see there'd be a dramatic increase in number of terrorist attacks. But prior to that, it was, I won't say unheard of, but it wasn't in the top of the leaderboards. So what does that say? I don't know. That requires an academic really to look into the data, but it does show that at least in terms of terrorism, in terms of Islamic-related terrorism or radical terrorism of the form of jihad, it wasn't as dominant in the 90s until after 2001.
right, yeah, you're right. I think there are a lot of statistics to just go through all these things, and probably we're not gonna do that because that's not something we wanted to do as such. So what I'm gonna say is, if anybody wants to join and maybe they have a story to talk about, or how they see the world differently after 9/11, they can just come over and just have a conversation. If not, Madan, what I'm thinking is maybe just review a couple of videos, maybe Sam Shamoon's video that you shared today, or maybe some other you think.
Yeah, good. Good. And just another little bit of commentary regarding the 9/11 event. We just want to, I mean, in terms of the rise of atheism after that, or neo-atheism as it's called, I mean, the Richard Dawkins. I mean, first of all, correlation isn't causation, and any of the things that we're saying, the correlation is not necessarily causation. But I'm pretty sure there's a case to be made, and many people have made it, that new atheism or the rise of people like Sam Harris, the Four Horsemen of Richard Dawkins, and Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens. There was a massive momentum coming from the post 9/11 world, where religion was put on the spotlight, particularly Islam, and that is possibly what motivated maybe the religion poisons everything, God is not great, which was the subtitle of his book, Christopher Hitchens, and God is no great is a direct argument launched against Islam, because Allahu Akbar is God is great, and God is not great is the direct negation of
The
that statement.
opposite negation of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
among these new atheists, I think Christopher Hitchens was probably the most vehement of all, pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah,
in his attack, basically. Yeah.
absolutely. And this kind of started the discourse surrounding whether or not people are now magnifying into like extremist and radical groups and extrapolating beyond that, and justifiably so, and in holding accountable the broader whole, the entirety of all religions, the religious institutions, even the religious people. And this kind of the argument, a lot of people would have said that the new horseman of atheism's real gripe is with a very small sect of Islamic radicals, people who have taken religion out of context. And reality is that anybody can take anything out of context. So it kind of started these discussions. If you watch the Sam Harris debate with Reza Aslan, is Islam fundamentally a peaceful religion? Is it something that these jihadists and extremists have taken hostage in out of context? And if you look at that entire argument, the debate, which kind of surrounded the idea that religion is bad and atheism is superior or secularism is superior, and we need to get rid of all religion because religion is bad. The counter argument to that was that you're lumping in all religions based on a few bad apples, and just because the practitioners of religion took it out of context doesn't even mean that specific religion, aka Islam, is overall bad or it advocates violence. And these are the sort of debates that it kind of launched. And yeah, it took it to stratospheric heights. I mean, I don't think we would have the new atheist movement. Why should we? Because the conversation of religion came into the limelight. People started. I can't really say exactly when it began, but I would imagine it would be just media conversations, commentators, journalists coming on and talking about this, and the racial and religious sensitivity surrounding it. And eventually, it just took a few voices to say that, look, there is an issue with religion here, because this is what it leads to. It leads to planes hitting the buildings really fast and killing lots of people in a sacrificial way, in a suicidal way. Religion is dangerous in that sense. It's intoxicating. It creates paranoia, like a schizophrenic sort of drug in the mind. And that's really when these conversations began. So
Yeah, and that's the time when the words like that's the time when the words like jihad and all those became really, widespread in the media. At that Up until that point, these words were not out there. People were not using it. People didn't know what that means. People probably still don't know what that means, basically. And their probably understanding is skewed by this event, and probably even, if you can say, the voices of these new atheists, pretty much, right? I mean, if you see Richard Dawkins and perhaps um, Hitchens, they were quite vehemently against religions, and in particular Islam, basically. But there were, I mean, saner voices as well within them. A more softer voice was probably Dan Dennett, Sam Harris to some extent. I mean, he was. At some point, at least he was not painting all the religions with the same brush, pretty much, right? I mean, he was vehemently against Islam, specifically due to the 9/11 attacks, and he made some really, what do you call, I think we have evaluated his comments from that time, and some of his comments seem like, really radical, in terms of, coming from an atheist, basically. But then he has clarified those comments later on as well, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, there is a shift in thinking of even those atheists, basically, right, from this among this group of neo atheists, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, the world was divided pretty much. You started seeing, I mean, within the ummah or the Muslim community as well, people who were just good-natured Muslims, and 99% of them are, and just we are talking only just 1% of these radical sect or something like that. Those who didn't hadn't read about their books started reading the books, basically is to trying to find where can we find these verses which talk about, we never heard that. Because if you talk about the subcontinental Muslims, most of them, they recite the Quran in Arabic, but they don't understand what they're reading pretty much, and their only understanding of the Quran is what their Maulanas are talking about in the khutbahs and all. So that's their limited understanding, right? So then they started reading, and then the rise of online education, in terms of, you can read Quran online, you can read their translations, you can read tafsirs and all, tafasir and all those things. You can read the sirah literature, the biography of the Prophet, and all those things. People started researching it, right? And this was a shift not only happening within Islam. This shift was also happening within Christian communities as well. Pretty much, they started reading, and then this, the rise of what you call neo-atheists started to happen. People started leaving religion en masse, pretty much, in a sense.
Yeah.
And a large number of people from Christianity left religions rather than those who left Islam per se. I mean, if you look at the statistics, right?
Mm.
Due to this, large scale atheistic movement, in a sense, or irreligious movement, however you want to call it, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. It seems as though, yes, that seems to be the case. It correlates with all these changes that are happening in the production and circulation of highly provocative atheistic literature, taking a hard stand against religion in a way that was not seen before. And you could definitely make the link that this was created by that. Or, I mean, perhaps there's this kind of push and pull maneuvering or feedback loop, that perhaps it is the case that religion, the religious deconversions or atheist spike in atheism that was happening in the West, particularly America, was a cause behind the new atheism movement as well, rather than it being caused by the new atheist movement. It might be like a two-way feedback loop, two-way causation going on there. We don't really know exactly which one created what, but I suspect, obviously, the literature played a massive role. Um, but yeah, yeah, and I mean, whatever the merits of that, whatever happened during that time, it was a massive awakening for the world, and I don't think many people knew about what Islam was. I mean, I remember there was like jokes about the Sikh members of the Sikh community, not jokes, but kind of it became a bit of a meme, if you want to call it, during the time where members of the Sikh community were attacked based on the idea that they were in turbans, and turbans were associated with Islam, and so on. And so there's a lot of religious misunderstandings and stereotyping and things going on. So it was a massive awakening of a type of discussion that we've never seen before. And really today, the fact that we have this massive Islamic emphasis in every direction where we're going is just like a little bit of a result of that. It really is, because that is forever tainted the public perception of Muslims in Islam. And despite the militant levels of positive propaganda being disseminated in order to preserve and or rectify the image of Muslims and so on, despite that, which a lot of people have taken on board, it's um, pretty much become an actual
Synonymous, yeah, synonymous with.
racism and Islamophobia to actually even think about critiquing Islamic aspects and so on. So there has been a shift towards, from paranoia and and wariness and even maybe hatred and enmity to calm acceptance and or understanding and diplomacy and multiculturalism and multi-ethnic acceptance, religious freedom and anti-racism, basically. And today, a focus on systematic racism or institutionalized racism, that it is the same part and parcel of how, for example, blacks were once associated with criminality and still are. They think, black people are more willing to commit crimes and there's something wrong with their culture, and this is perceived as racism, and you can't even talk about it. You know, it's very similarly, Islamophobia is deployed for the same effect. That
Yeah, it's synonymous with racism now, even though
yeah,
you are
to the
critiquing
point,
just an ideology, pretty much. Yeah.
yeah, to the point where you can't even critique the Quran in the same way you can critique Christianity. You can't critique the founder, you can't critique the tenants, you can't critique any. It's basically you have to look at it through a rose tinted vision. And you are basically walking on eggshells around it, and that's another kind of um, atmosphere, another sort of manifestation that has happened today as a result of 9/11. I mean, obviously, there's subsequent events that happen in between. It's not one cause, but that's kind of where we are today. And yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
I think you're right. When you see, I think that marked the shift in. I think quite a lot of things were intertwined right after 9/11, as the momentum shifted towards um tagging Islam as a religion of terror, basically, and it was under scrutiny for quite some time. And then these groups started kind of, maybe they started reacting as well, basically. I mean, you see rise of someone like Anjum Chaudhry in the UK as well. And then what was that,
yeah, so
725 or something like that in UK as well, the UK train bombings. And then
yeah,
in
7/7.
India there was 77, right? 77. And then in India it was, I think, what, some terrorist attack in 2008 or something like that. So there was series of things that were happening. Probably they were retaliatory, or I don't know what the cause was, but these events started happening more than they were happening earlier, right? So maybe the chain reaction had started somehow when you brought Islam into limelight. Uh, all these things, all these groups thought that now, I mean, probably it's our responsibility to do it, basically, or they were provoked, rather, not responsibility. Sorry, I used the wrong word. They were kind of provoked to do it, basically, in a sense, right? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm just hypothesizing it, basically.
Well,
And then
yeah, that's
all of a
kind of
sudden you saw this, all series of more and more terrorist attacks, basically, right? More than average, probably, right? But at the same time, those groups who were talking about Islam, or at least evaluating the books or the history from a neutral perspective, they were tagged as Islamophobes, pretty much, right? And there were some who were like attacking more vehemently. Someone like Ayan Hirsi Ali, or maybe even before that, Ali Dashti was doing it, right? I think, I don't know when Ali Dashti wrote that. You remember that he wrote this book called 23 Years. He was a Iranian scholar, I think, right? That book went viral, pretty much, right? But yeah, anyways, so yeah, a lot of these guys were coming, like, and then the exodus of Muslims from Islam started. Not exodus, what do you call, defection, rather, started from. You saw a lot of Muslims leaving. A lot of the Muslims started claiming they wanted, moderate Islam. They wanted to, reform. They were some form of reformist, basically. What's his name? The Egyptian guy from UK, Tariq. What's his name?
Ramadan, Tariq Ramadan.
Tariq Ramadan, right? Tariq Ramadan, right? So yeah, I mean, you started seeing all different kinds of, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
so you want to add something else to it, basically?
yeah. I mean,
Or,
yeah,
or
yeah. I mean, like you've got to take into account as well, though, around that time, there's many things that were happening. It's not merely the fact of 9/11, but also the fact of internet, the rise of internet connection. We're talking about 9/11 happening just about the time where people were getting broadband internet and it becoming wholesale home, like a home item that it was in everyone's home, and they could get on it ultimately in an unlimited sense of the word. And before that, it was dial-ups. So we're talking about 2001, just before the broadband expansion, right? The broadband whole mainstreaming. I think broadband became really readily available around when, really into the homes by 2003 or four, right? 2002 or three or four, something like that, right? It was possibly there even 2001, but it wasn't as commonplace, I think. But I think by 2004, almost everybody had it, right? And that has a remarkable impact on the rise of atheism and also the rise of uh, uh, ex-Muslims, because
yeah,
when you
yeah, something I touched on, right? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so it's not merely of the fact of 9/11, but that obviously goes hand in hand, I would imagine.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
the,
mean, there were
yeah,
quite a lot of factors that affected all these things. Basically, it was
yeah,
just not a single cause, not one cause. Basically, right?
yes, yes,
I mean,
yeah, and not
we are
also
not
you have
talking
greater,
we're not talking about contingency argument, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Not
exactly. We're
all
talking
things
about
lead to one
a
cause.
number of a constellation of causes from greater connectivity and globalization and etc. And as you said, I mean, you saw the 7/7 bombings, and you had bombings in India, and you have bombings around the world, and even Africa, and wherever you want to call it. There was terrorism, spike of terrorism activity in a way that was never seen before, coming from seemingly Muslims, from the Muslim world. And that was the case. The number of mosques and masjids in Pakistan, for example, trebled, who were engaging in recruitment for suicide bombing. The numbers were, if I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it was a massive surge in terrorism training, even, and this
Right,
happened
right.
in 2001. And I would imagine that is because of the what they cite, what they say is that the war, a massive part of the war started then with the invasion of Afghanistan and then eventually Iraq, and that, and in the background you already have this ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which was so in combination with all of these things, it created that sort of edge. And so you heard when people did commit these terrorist attacks, what the reason was, and the reason was because of foreign policy. They kind of not proudly declared, but in great contention to the idea that they're just mad psychopathic killers, or they're just doing it because they want to overthrow peaceful, freedom-loving American values. It was maybe not because of those reasons, because the reason was is because their homeland has been occupied, and it just created this hotbed for radicalism. You know that these are radicalized people who are traumatized from their homeland being invaded in such a manner, and America colluding with the rest of the Western states, UK, etc., and going into the Middle East was just basically another way of saying it's. A lot of people visualized it like this. It was the I won't say the white man versus the brown man, but even the white man versus Muslims, but it was the Crusaders um, versus Muhammadan, you know, versus Muslims versus Islam. So it's like another kind of crusade, or almost. It was kind of perceived as. Could that then play a role in this? A lot of researchers think that does play a role. The the war torn conditions, etc. That helps radicalize people, and that was one of the reasons behind the. So we have all of these things colliding together to explain this phenomena, not neglecting the fact that the texts were part of the conversation as well, the discourse, whether Islam, and this might be the more fruity part of the discussion, whether
Right. I
yeah,
think you in all this mix, there is also a part of the scripture as well, right? I mean, that can't be neglected, right?
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that was pointed out by new atheists as well, right?
Mm.
And it's not that it wasn't talked about before that as well. when
Yeah.
when Salman Rushdie wrote Satanic Verses in 1989, there was a huge uproar on that book. I mean, that uh, the publisher was killed. Basically, there were huge riots in Japan, in India, and all these other places as well, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there was this element of scripture as well, but it kind of was not as alive as what happened after 9/11, basically, because anybody who saw that their lands have been attacked or occupied, they saw a resort, and the scriptures pretty much picked it up and just tried to justify those attacks, basically, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
happening. That thing wasn't happening earlier, pretty much, but then those radical groups pretty much started justifying it, pretty much, and
Mm.
so it
So
it kind of
you can make a lot of points there. You can say that the fact that this wasn't happening to the same scale indicates that this is not something to do with Islam, rather it is rather something to do with the causal conditions that was generated post 9/11.
yeah,
Geopolitical
that's what I'm
relations.
saying. It's a mix of all these things. I mean, all of these things have a part to play, pretty much, right? And
Yeah, but
including
then
the
again,
scripture, pretty much, right?
yeah,
Including the scripture, pretty much,
but
right?
then again, here's the issue, kind of like the philosophical or scientific error here that's revolving around that argument. Is that although it is the case that plausibly that yes, true. I mean, we see the spike after post 9/11. We don't see it before it, so therefore it might not be to do with Islam because Muslims weren't doing that before. But the thing is, you would need that's a kind of a too reductive way of thinking about things, right? Ultimately, every single kind of religious prescription and or uh, scriptural command and whatever you want to call it has a set of environmental conditions which needs to be triggered before it can be and if it can be
It
implemented.
can
Let's
become
call it
violent,
right.
basically,
Right?
to put it mildly. Yeah,
For example, you may not go to Hajj every year, and somebody may go to Hajj once in their lifetime, but that's because it's commanded to be in that manner, right? Or you're not going to pray namaz at the wrong times. There's going to be some environmental, social conditions that have to be met. What are those environmental and social conditions? Well, the time of day has to be at a particular point, right? So clearly, there's a relationship between the world and what the scripture says, and I think the information in the scripture won't translate into behavior until unless those conditions are fulfilled, right? And in similar vein, it could. So my point is, the mere fact that we've not seen a surge of these before doesn't completely wipe away the possibility of scripture being an influence, given that after the 9/11 conditions came into place, which involved war, which involved this emphasis on your arch rival Christianity, or in the form of America or something, or the white man attacking and conquering the place, it would help recruit jihadists, because the conditions are now in place of that war, of that your homeland is under attack, and here's the Islamic
or the
injunction saying that,
subjugation of the ummah and all those things. I mean,
yeah,
so many factors, so many parameters. So yeah,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. So the scripture could still be used in that purpose. That does not mean, however, that necessarily I'm saying that the scripture does have clear and direct, explicit commands, or even implied commands that allows for the type of behavior that we see by certain terrorists. Let's say, namely 9/11. But irrespective of that, we don't need to really go into the normative discussions regarding what Islam advocates versus what it doesn't. We don't need to do that. Rather, what we all we really need to do is there a causal connection, right? Now, and causal connection simply just means that the scripture is perceived to be used as a weapon, or perceived to be used as an instrument that provides that rationale or justification, right? Whether that's really, under scholarly interpretation, under jurisprudent readings of Islam, is the correct way of reading the Quran is I'm not discussing right now. I can we can say that's a separate topic, related but separate.
Yeah,
But this is what,
that's not a topic we are discussing here. So
yeah.
that's gonna
I'm
be
saying
way out of
we
our
can discuss.
syllabus.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, we can talk about it in this video, but what I'm trying to say is neatly say that actually the conceptual connection between the two are not necessary, right? That's what I'm trying to say. That you can actually think that the Islamic scriptures is causally associated with increasing the likelihood of terrorism, whilst also thinking that we should remain agnostic whether or not it actually, in terms of literary interpretation, supports those acts.
Yeah,
You see what I'm saying?
why I'm
Yeah.
saying that's a rabbit hole, that's
Yeah.
going down the rabbit hole, is because then we'll have to explain all the possible stances, and that includes, the purest form versus the more Sufist kind of form and all those things, right? So that's
Mm.
going to become a really, I mean, we won't be able to do justice to all those, things. So that's why I'm saying if we go down that route, that's going to be really tough to, handle in this stream. Basically, we shouldn't. So
Yeah.
shall we
Yeah.
shall we move on to the review then? Oh, sorry,
Um,
you haven't finished yet. So please finish
maybe
your
I have
thought and
finished.
then.
Let me just sum it up. Basically, I'm trying to say that something can have a causal connection with another phenomena without necessarily being the correct, if it's a book, for example, the correct reading of that book. So let me just give you an example. Somebody can read Mr. Bean's comics, well, let's use a better example. Somebody can listen to a rap song and become radicalized by it and commit crimes. Let's say the rap song is talking about a lot of violence, right? And it's talking about a lot of violence and seemingly to glamorize or glorify violence. But if you read it in its proper context, if you read it properly and listen to it properly or transcribe the lyrics, you might actually see that he's not advocating for violence, right? It might actually be like uh, a theatrical kind of song that uses violence, but it's a metaphor, and there might be places and parts on the rap song that it says not to engage in violence, that is just fiction, etc. So, does the rap CD or the rap singer, the rapper, is he advocating violence, and is the lyrics advocating violence on a normal, reasonable reading? You may say no in terms of literary reading. No, there is no explicit or even implied intent to motivate the listener to go and commit violence. But it could still be a sociological phenomena that, let's say, young, impressionable teenagers without a lot of capacity to understand things, who then listen to this rap song, they just become more violent as a result of it. Let's say, right? They listen to it and they just become violent, right? And you can say the same thing for video games. A lot of video games, they're not trying to cause violence. The video game maker did not make a video game so that it encourages this teenager to go and commit violence. But it could very well be that you play the video games for, like, say, a month, and you end up becoming more violent as a result. So there's a causal connection, therefore, between the video game or the rap song and the violence. There's correlation or causation, you want to call it. But at the same time, we can also distinguish between the causal connection or the correlation and whether or not the author, the creator of the video game and or the song advocated violence. You see that? I just wanted to make that distinction. So we can still say that with Islam, there might be some correlation.
I think there's one more distinction to be made here
Yeah,
between, right?
yeah.
I
Go
mean,
on.
your example, within your example,
Hmm.
depends on what the purpose of the creator is, right? I mean, say
Yes.
the rapper, basically. If he's creating for entertainment, that's perfectly fine. Then if somebody takes that piece as a literal uh, action to do
Hmm.
something, say, harming, that's a
Hmm.
very different thing to a scripture that says you have to live your life this way, right? And if
Hmm.
therein are subscribed certain injunctions, then those are going to be taken very differently to what these rapper songs are going to be taken, pretty much, right? In the first case, in the rapper case, there's going to be a clear violation of what the intention was. In the second case, it's not as clear cut, basically.
You can
You see
say,
the
yeah. I mean,
difference, right?
possibly, yeah. I mean, it depends what sort of rap song we're comparing it to. I mean, there are some songs that it does instruct you to do things, but not those things, right? Um,
Right.
uh, for, for example, there are songs by Tupac Shakur, for example, who talks about oral violence, but I mean, somebody may listen to it not very intently and think that he's glamorizing it, but if you listen to it intently, he's actually
Advocating
disgruntled.
for violence, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's dramatizing. It's more like poetry in the sense that he's dramatizing it, but to create a sickening feeling, right? It's meant to be to show the horrors of, let's say, urban Black America in working class neighborhoods. Some of the horrors of that sort of gangster lifestyle, etc. Let's say there are some videos or musics of by Tupac Shakur doing that, and he's actually trying to say that this is really bad. But when not everybody's going to be listening to that lyrics in that form, and somebody may listen to it and feel kind of, you
Compelled to
know,
do the actions,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
might just find it cool or whatever. So that's what
Mhm.
I'm saying. So where yes, here obviously the rapper is advocating perhaps the opposite of. He may not be executing in the best way, but he's advocating in his intent the opposite of what the listener it wants to do. The listener may nevertheless uh, perhaps take it out of context or whatever you want to call it. But there'll still be a causal connection between the two things. If that song, that rap song, is seeing a correlation, causation between a rise of violence and it's being there, that wasn't there before, right? And not, other songs don't have the same level, then we can actually say there's some sort of connection between the two things. That doesn't mean, however, that the rap song itself is intending for that behavior to manifest. Right, but the question of when it comes to Islam is just then will have to be a very it'll be a theological debate regarding the literature, what actually things mean here, and whether or not the violence that these people have been doing is part of Islam. Yeah, that's the only way to settle that debate. But we can still consistently think that there's a causal connection between the two things.
Right. Right. All right.
Which
I
it is.
think
I mean,
that's that.
it's almost
I think we. Sorry, Madan. You go ahead.
which I think that probably is because it's almost undeniable that the Quran
See, I
and
mean,
the
you have to. You can do two things. I mean, you can be. I mean, of course, we have to look at it neutrally. If you think, and if you stand as a neutral person and look at the text of the Quran or the Hadith literature and think of it. And since you and I, Madan, both do not believe that Quran is word of Allah, right? I mean, that's our take, right? Or any God exists, or any God gives any scripture to human beings, right? We're fairly positive about that. From that neutral perspective, if you look at those texts, those scriptures, what do you think is it's coming from military class, and then it's gonna have those injunctions nonetheless, right? Even if those are there, you can interpret it's kind of a, you can think of it as a military manual, right? You can do war, you can do war and defense, you can do, sometimes you can do offensive wars, you can do certain kind of things in a certain social if certain social conditions are met, basically something that you mentioned probably 5-10 minutes back as well, right? If somebody is being oppressed, maybe you can take up an offensive military war. If somebody is attacking you, you can probably do a you can do a war to defend yourself or your territory, right, basically. And if you're thinking that way, the way I'm thinking, basically, then you can say, okay, this text probably has injunctions for those things, but they are based for those times, basically, right? And this book somehow kind of evolved into a, you know into a religious scripture, basically, right? From a people following that empire to becoming a religion, basically.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But what's your point regarding that in respect to what I'm saying?
No, so what my
Mm,
point is that those things are still there, and they might be pretty, out there in the open. Basically, you cannot deny those things as being not there, and maybe causally sufficient to provoke someone, but they have been taken out of context from those times to becoming a religious book, to being kind of becoming a force to uh, provoke somebody who thinks that these acts would provide them with something greater good in next life, basically, right?
mm.
So if you talk about, I think we'll open a whole different box, Pandora box, pretty much, if we go there. So maybe we should finish it here, right?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, this stream was chosen to discuss this, so I'm not sure why. I don't know if you want to move on from
Oh,
this
you
topic.
want to go with this thing? Okay.
No, no. I'm saying because we started this stream to talk about this particular topic, so we might
No,
be.
that's my perspective. That's what I'm saying. I mean, those injunctions are for real, right? I mean, there's nothing metaphorical about them, right? Those are in my eyes, right? I'm saying in my eyes, those
But
are uh,
you did say
those are
that
war
going into
injunctions, basically, right?
yeah. So going, I think you said going into that you will have to take into account of the various different schools, the
I'm
Sufi.
saying those layers that have been put afterwards, basically those
Okay.
war manuals that's then when it was being converted to a religion,
Hmm.
because since it was a war manual, how would you convince uh, how would you convince a soldier to die for an empire, right? Because they die, they have their feelings, they see. I mean, when these wars were happening in 7th century Arabia, or even prior to that, when these people were not even united, probably, right? What they were seeing, I mean, humans have been seeing death of their near and dear ones in wars, basically, and they had these questions: why am I doing it? And anytime these empires were making their soldiers to fight for that empire, after a heavy loss, they would have these questions: why am I doing this? And there is so much war and suffering, and all those near and dear ones are dying, right? And then these religious uh, restructuring of those war manuals to include greater goods in heaven, and all those things were included, right? So now that becomes those injunctions became more of a, what do you call, um, a religious duty, basically, in a sense, right?
Hmm.
Fi sabilillah, basically, right?
Hmm.
You see the point I'm trying to make,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go on.
right? So those injunctions now became those strong things, basically, that you have to fight in the way of Allah, basically, right? And so those war manuals that were present at that time for just those empires now became embedded with a religious ideology, where the cause shifted from fighting for the empire to fighting for the cause of a religion that was made up. At least, see, I'm telling you my perspective, right? So this doesn't have to be a universal thing, but I'm thinking it from a logical perspective, basically, as to why it makes sense that why these things were included, basically. But then it became such a strong force that it remained within it, and now anybody who doesn't follow it, pretty much, yeah, I mean, they think they are not doing something for the Allah. I mean, if you tell that to a suicide bomber for the Fab 19 or whatever they were called, basically, by Osama bin Laden, right? That was their religious duty. They did it for. I mean, all the political reasons were there for them to act.
Hmm.
But then in their minds, they probably didn't even flinch for a second, thinking that we're gonna be, ramming these uh, jetliners into buildings, basically, right? And
Hmm.
not just that, 7/7 and all those, you know, attacks as well, pretty much later on as well, right? So what I'm thinking is that shift from fighting for a religious empire to converting into a religion, and those injunctions remaining the same
Mm.
has given that fuel to the fire pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, there is obviously a debate to be had there, and a lot of people have done it in various different channels, and I don't think we have the time to, whether or not there is one the permissibility for a combatant, Islamic combatant, for example, to in defense and or of during an aggressive war even having the ability so in defense of Islam and or in an aggressive war to expand, have the ability to directly attack civilians. There's a debate regarding that, and secondly, whether or not martyrdom can be justified that way, and there, yeah. So that would kind of fall into the there is let's be honest, there's no universal definition of terrorism, but there are several definitions of terrorism which kind of are similar to one another, and one of the most commonplace ones is that as an act of political violence. Maybe that's the essence. Act of political violence, right? Some other definitions of terrorism include, for example, um, um, committing a crime where your motivation is one for ideological or political reasons in order to spread and disseminate the messages of the ideology through that violence. So it's a political crime in order to spread the message of that ideology, like a threat, like a form of advertisement, marketing campaign, whatever you want to call it. So that's one of the definitions as well, and that's also a commonplace one. So the difference between this one, that one, and the former one is that it adds the element of messaging, adds the element of public awareness, raising public. So it's done so. Terrorism is such that it's done so for that ideological purpose, but it means nothing if it's not done for a show for the public, right? It's a public show of violence for the ideology. So that's kind of and if you want to think, if you want to, the $1 million question might be: is the Islamic scriptures advocating for that? And there's a massive, probably something that we can't do right now because we don't have the resources in front of us. We probably would, if you want to have this conversation, probably have it with people who want to talk about it with us as well, Muslims who want to come on and talk about it. But that would then involve looking at the text, and then texts plural, and then trying to figure out, and the secondary interpretations, the scholarly work, trying to figure out whether or not it was the case that you could actually do that. You could actually commit violence of that nature, for example. So obviously there might be a disagreement of what crime is between the Islamic scripture and Islam and what the rest of the world might consider a crime, right? But I think most Muslims today, most people who say that there is no justification for terrorism within Islam, they would say, for example, attacking people, innocent people and civilians, that's both a crime in Western laws, right, and Islam. You can't kill that child, you can't kill that mother, you can't kill that father, you can't, people who are not combatants cannot be killed. Even if the end justifies the means, they cannot be killed. You can't have this kind of utilitarian motive where if I do kill them, then I get, we are in a better position strategically for military advantages for Islam. Even in those circumstances, it's not permissible, right? You can't just kill innocent civilians, etc. Whereas some people, well, the terrorists who seem to allegedly say that in fact there is ample justification within the the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammed, that in fact, yes, you can kill civilians. That's a massive debate, and in that sense, then a lot of people might think that Islam provides the justification for terrorism, justification for doing that. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go into
Yeah,
that more.
I think you can argue for both the sides basically. That's how vague the scriptures are basically, right? Anyone with any kind of position of on these topics, pretty much. Any kind of a stance on these kind of topics probably can fairly justifies his or her stance based on the scripture, pretty much. If you think that violence is justified according to scripture, sunnah, and the Quran, they can bring verses and probably hadith from hadith collection as well. And someone who thinks that there has to be no violence and innocent civilians should not be killed and all those, they can also do the same exactly. Yeah, so that's the nature of these kind of scriptures basically, and that kind of bolsters the point I was trying to make, because these scriptures, probably what we know as Quran and hadith literature, probably was written over a long period of time. Probably initially it was written, at least the Quran was probably compiled through Umayyad dynasty, and then the Hadith literature was probably compiled by Abbasid dynasty, right? And they had their own agendas basically, right? And that's what they tried to probably bring through these scriptures pretty much. So you'll see, and probably multiple compilers wrote it, and that's why you'll see all sorts of things. You'll have peace, you'll have uh, not killing of innocent you know women and children and all those things. And at the same time you'll find cases where exactly the opposite has happened pretty much, right? And so somebody might want, if somebody wants to really justify those acts, can point at those particular hadith and saying that, okay, yeah, this is what this hadith says. And someone who's wants to go against it can also point at some very different hadith and say, no, 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 this supports my point instead of yours.
Yeah, but
you're being
we need to think about whether there's a coherent, consistent, clear delineation between the differences in the events to create a systematic sort of methodology of violence and when it can be enacted. So unless there's contradictory situations where the exact same situation, which can happen, exact same situation or similar enough situation that situation led to different sort of events, and therefore you derive distinct rulings from similar situations, then you could say that there's contradictory messaging, and therefore, depending on how you're willing to interpret things or based on your feelings, you may your existing ideology, your attitudes, you may pick one or the other. Whereas I'm pretty sure if you can forge a coherent, consistent, non-contradictory set of guidelines, derive certain edicts from those historical events, and make a distinction between the very many different events. Why, in one situation, hostility was allowed, the civilian casualties was allowed, versus another situation where civilian casualties weren't allowed. Then you can start developing this kind of coherent, non-contradictory sort of framework of military excursions, justified military excursions, which involves very many different scenarios, and why the rationale behind why in those scenarios it permitted that sort of violence versus why in other scenarios it didn't. And ultimately, if that's the case, then you have more of a coherent message, and then you can have somebody who might be wrong and somebody who might be right. I mean, I don't think the Islamic scriptures are as vague or ambiguous as the Christian scriptures, right? That allows for that sort of open-ended readings and allowing for a pluralism of various different interpretations. I think Islamic scripture is far more literal, even although hadiths are a bit ambiguous. I think there's enough ammunition and clarity there.
I think Quran is fairly ambiguous, right? I mean, if you go through it, right? I mean, not just saying about these. I mean, if you're talking only about violent verses, probably, then probably yes, you're right. But then in general, if you see, 1/5 of the Quran doesn't really make much of a sense, basically. So you have to resort to uh, you know, tafsir. Basically, you have to resort to tafasir literature, pretty much, right? You just go to find out what happened, and if you really read the early tafasir, pretty much, the classical scholars,
Mm,
I mean, they would side on the side of violence because that's how the nature of their society was, right? So they
mm,
are writing from the perspective of their societies, and that's what I'm saying. If you remove yourself from this, considering this book as a religious book, and think of it as being written by those empires for their own kind of end goals, basically, then the picture
mm,
becomes much more clear as to why those guys are writing. Of course, much later scholars thought of it as a religious scripture, but then they were still living in the same kind of similar kind of a milieu, basically, right? Because there were lots of wars still, a lot of fighting. They were under these guys were scholars like Ibn Kasir and all those were liking Jalalain, and all those were were writing under these empires, pretty much, right? So those kind of things, those social milieu basically is reflected upon how their interpretation turned out to be, pretty much, at that
mm,
time, right?
mhm.
And as you removed yourself from those scholars to like more modern day scholars like Yasir Qazi and Tariq Ramadan and the likes of him, you'll see a much more watered version of these same scriptures, pretty much, right?
Yeah, yeah, but I still find it hard to fathom that. I mean, it depends whether or not the social milieu was supposed to be sewed into into the timeline of all of humanity, which it was, right? Um, if the Quran is meant to be a timeless guideline, etc. Let's just say timelessness, or it being for all errors, is not the same thing as saying that therefore everything should be performed in any situation. Of course not. There are conditions involved. If those conditions are no longer here today, then it won't apply, right? So it could be for all time, whilst at the same time not meaning that those particular conditions, which might be time bound, um, it, it might be that those rules are no longer, I won't say defunct, but no longer relevant. It's still there if those conditions come into play once more, but it's no longer relevant. And you can think of different types of different types of rules, like
See, that's the problem with these conditions, right? Somebody can think of those conditions as any time, right? And somebody might be more liberal with those conditions, right? That's the thing, right? That's the interpretation part, basically, right? In terms of
so.
who
What conditions? A
defines the
liberal?
conditions.
What do you mean by
I mean,
liberal?
see, certain verses. Somebody thinks that certain verses are to be enacted, and only when certain conditions are met, right? But
Mhm.
then those conditions are not very specific or very clear cut, basically, right? And everybody's interpretation might be different on those conditions. Basically, somebody might think, okay, that condition is ripe for me to act in a certain way that is prescribed in the book, basically.
Mhm.
And somebody else might think, no, this is not the same condition. Basically, those conditions are way past. They were in the 7th century. We probably might never have those kind of conditions. Those are kind of more liberal kind of people in the sense. So that's the distinction between these hardcore Islamist groups, pretty much, right? And
Yeah. So
almost 99% of the population, in the sense.
sure. So this kind of revisionist or progressive Islam that comes with looking at it broadly and thematically, and looking at the core virtues, and therefore abrogating and or just considering certain verses or points or commentaries to be redundant, no longer applicable in the modern day age, as you said. I still think, because this is very similar to law, and it's just legal interpretation. And the idea that not everything is clearly articulated or stated is pretty much the bread and butter for law. That doesn't mean you can't make more reasonable arguments and less reasonable arguments, or more plausible arguments or less plausible arguments. Um, so so you can, I mean, most of even Western law has evolved through judicial precedent. Precedent, it doesn't cover all circumstances. What it does is it sets one event or set of affairs or one particular example. It might involve, for example, a specific case, and in that particular case, somebody may have drank, for example, a bottle that contained snail inside it, and then drinks the snail a bottle containing the snail inside it, and gets diarrhea and sues the company and wins because the company had a duty of care to the consumer, let's say. And then that principle, now that particular event becomes this kind of standard, right? And then you start, and then through judicial interpretation and the legal canon evolves through that, that becomes a precedent, and then other precedents form under it. It becomes like a doctrine of negligence. Let's say this is an example of negligence. The person who drank the beer got ill because of this negligence on part of this company. But then if you extend that principle, you extend it to not just beer type situations. You extend it perhaps to a situation where somebody's drinking a can of Coke, and then you may not even limit it to Coke, but you may extend it broadly to food, and then you may not just consider just consumption, human consumption, but you may even do it to bikes and cars and anything that you buy. And then right now, that same principle is just expanded to the point where you have a duty of care to pretty much your neighbor, and your neighbor could basically mean anybody within your foresight of actions. So it's a very broad principle that's just evolved from that one precedent, and the different ways it can evolve like that. I mean, one, it could be very subjective and arbitrary. It could be that people down the line, as new generation, new cases evolve, they just kind of creatively take it beyond its scope, right? Beyond the facts of the case, and take it beyond. Other times, they strictly limit itself to similar sort of scenarios. It's very logical. It's very, very logical. And it won't go beyond this similar sort of situation. Now, to say that there is no way to interpret these things apart from it's just almost like the eye of the beholder of how they interpret it would mean there's no logical coherence in any sort of legal interpretation. There's no sort of right and wrong answer, right? I acknowledge there's not always a right and wrong answer. It depends how the texts are articulated, and there's definitely lots of ambiguity because it's human beings making these things up, and of course biases motivated people to take things out of context, and that can happen. But I'm not firm belief that there is no way to have a clean doctrine of law evolve from a precedent. It can be done. Now, my point is, can it be done in Islam? I don't think the mere fact that there are precedents and people take it out of context or they argue about it in and of itself, it shows that it's just subjective and subjective to a practitioner. I do think even with Islam there is a right and wrong. There are in certain areas opinions and commentary that has more plausibility than others. Right? Definitely. Let me just give you one example: the fact that the Prophet Muhammed was the messenger of God. There's hardly any dispute surrounding that. I mean, I know that's a form of interpretation as well, but it's like that's the obvious form of interpretation. There's no dispute over. I don't think any logical person can dispute it. And maybe stuff like something firm and obvious, like you have to pray. Forget what the specific prayers, but the fact that you have to pray, etc. Maybe even the specific prayers. Yeah, I think there's hardly any dispute what that means and how to do it. Wudu, there's hardly any significant dispute of what that means and how to do it. Right? Maybe there's a minority of opinions differing, but there is a general consensus, and I think there is an unbroken chain of logical coherence between those events that happened then and any sort of modern day versions of that. Like, can you do a wudu in the shower? Like, I don't think there's any like the precedent of wudu was, to do it with water, do it from these kind of the systems of the time, and the fact that can you do it from in a modern day shower? There's no dispute surrounding that, because the rationale, the reasoning of that particular rule, which is that you bathe yourself with water, you do your arms up to your elbows, your nose, your your back of your head, and you do it a number of times, 3 times each, if I recall carefully. You do your feet. That was the main. That was the emphasis. Yeah, it is meant to be done with water, etc. Where the water come from isn't that much of a concern. Yeah, apart from it has to be clean water, which means if the water is coming from an unclean place, then it's a concern. But otherwise, if the water is coming from a shower head or a bath or a tap, or if a with a bucket, it doesn't matter, right? And that's, can you see the logical thinking that I've done there from the event, and looked at the reasoning, and then tried to think and extend it to new situations by changing the events a little bit, and seeing whether or not it applies, and it does apply. I think you can do that with Islam for very many topics. Now, can you do that for
Yeah,
the?
I mean that's the thing. I mean there are certain things that you can do that, but there are
Mhm.
certain things you can't do. See, I think see the I mean certain conditions are gonna be same. Certain injections you said about the prophethood, right? Of Muhammad, right? Prophet Muhammad, basically. This is part of the shahada, basically, right? So you can't skip that part, basically. I mean that's gonna be universal. To cross that first line of being called a Muslim, you have to take the shahada. You have to believe in Allah, and you have to believe that Prophet Muhammad is messenger, basically, and not just messenger, but last and final messenger, basically, right? So those are certain injunctions. Before that you don't cross the line, pretty much. But there are certain things where you have that wiggle room, pretty much, in terms of your injunctions, basically, right? Anyway, Mahadin, I think we have a guest here.
Okay,
Shall we add him in?
sure, go for it.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
Walaikum.
कैसे हो भाई आप लोग? इंग्लिश में बोल रहे हैं, आप उर्दू में भी बात कर
You
सकते
have to yeah,
हैं।
speak
Okay,
in English.
okay, brother. I will try.
So what is your thought on the topic, Said
About
Bhai?
the 23 year of 9/11, I guess. It's
23
about,
years, yeah.
yeah.
This was just a coincidence, basically, right? So I thought this was a coincidence that hard to ignore, right? 23 years of prophetic life versus 23 years of 9/11. Not that we are talking about any correlation in there, no correlation whatsoever. We are not even talking about that. Just for the title's sake, for the clickbait, basically.
Okay. You
But
know, yeah, go ahead.
But do you see any change in past 23 years? Have you seen anything?
Yeah. I see a lot of changes. Yeah, for Muslim, for us, there is a lot of positive change can take place.
Are you still a Muslim?
Oh, I'm writing a book
No,
about.
nobody considers you one.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to them. They declare each other a kafir. One sect declare other sect is a kafir. So
You're not even a
it's
kafir. You are a munafiq.
no. They had told me I'm a kafir. They told me I was by Muslim. All the Muslim wherever I go, they declare I'm a kafir. So,
Right. You
but
are a kafir.
yeah, it doesn't matter for
I'm
their
just
was.
kidding. I'm just kidding. Whatever
No,
say, just
yeah,
in
yeah.
in just
No, I'm
light-hearted.
talking about the Muslim who say kafir. It doesn't matter what they say to me because they even call their father kafir if he disagree with them. You know, yes, they will do that. If a Salafi father said, "I do not believe this hadith," then he will declare his father is a kafir. He reject the hadith. So these are that extremists they are. So since 9/11, I have been observing. I observed a lot of things before 9/11 and after 9/11. Since 9/11, very positive happening to Muslim world. It is a very good, encouraging me for Muslim future. What gonna happen? You see, before 9/11, there was a jihadis movement of jihadi. You see all the places it was in like a Kashmir and all over the world. There were jihadi in Afghanistan. In many places, there were jihadis. They're recruiting people are joining. There were jihadis. And now, after what happened to this jihadi? Where this jihadi goes? What they are doing right now? So what they are doing right now, they are not doing jihadi, jihad anymore. What they are doing is they are now doing a new type of jihad. This is very good, very positive jihad. This jihad, they call it dawa. If you see them, before 9/11, there was no dawa jihad. Okay, there was only fighting for land, that kind of jihad they were doing. Now they are Muslim never have any organized known for they do the work of dawa before 9/11. There is no organization in the history of Muslim who organized based on doing dawa work like a missionary, Christian known for them missionary for hundreds of, yeah, maybe thousands of years. They have been working for on missionary work, at least hundreds of years. They have been doing missionary work. They are going nation to nation and they do missionary work. But Muslims do not have any organization who have done dawa work. They never have any work, missionary dawa work doing any organization before 9/11. So
Are you
what?
doing dawa work as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. This is what I'm doing with you. I'm also doing right now dawa. Okay, so
Okay, let me ask Madin. What do you think, Madin, of Said? How is he? Is he a good dawa fellow, or are you convinced with his arguments?
Uh, I feel as though what everything Saeed is saying today sounds almost entirely crazy. You know, like, like, what, what is this topic that we're talking about? I thought we were talking about 9/11
yeah,
and jihad.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
it's
You
everything,
know,
like, why
like
are we talking about dawa work all of a sudden? And what is that about? I've never heard of it.
yeah,
no, he's
because
he's saying that due to 9/11, a lot of dawa folks have started doing dawa. I mean, you didn't
yeah,
see a lot of them in Speaker's Corner or YouTube, but Said bhai, that's not due to probably 9/11. There are a lot of other factors, probably more compelling factors that have
no, no,
given
yeah,
rise to this dawa movement, and that is one of the biggest factor is the invention of internet, basically,
Yeah,
no,
and
no, no,
then
no, no.
things like YouTube and these platforms where you could easily connect, right? I mean, think about it. Think about it. In we are talking about 23 years of the prophetic life of Prophet Muhammad, right? Think about it. In 10 years in Makkah, he hardly was able to garner 86 followers, right? 80 numbers vary in different
Yeah, yeah, see.
hadiths, right? And some
Yeah, yeah,
say
it's
about
under
95
100.
or something, and some say
It's,
86,
yeah,
right?
under 100.
Think about it. Yeah, under 100 is a good way to say, right? Think about it. Here, people can have millions and millions of followers within an year or two, right? So that's the kind of things have changed, and that's why these Dawa folks have been able to do Dawa pretty much, right? And oh, nice. So thanks to the kafir, basically, right?
Yeah,
Kafir
yeah, yeah, yeah,
technology, right?
yes, yeah. Prophet when the Prophet Muhammad in Medina, Makkah, Makkah, people only became a very few people became a Muslim because there was a fear. They were afraid to become a Muslim. Just like if in India, if somebody Hindu became a Muslim, they're gonna kill them. So at that time of the Prophet in Medina, Makkah, they're afraid to become a Muslim. So there was a lot of prosecution going on that time. Anyway, our topic is not that one.
Yeah, I
But
mean your argument is fallacious, and I'm really feeling like refuting it. But go ahead. The topic is
yeah,
not that basically, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what happened to these jihadis after 9/11? They could not do any more jihad, physical jihad, war jihad. So they turned into doing, because after 9/11, the American, all the West started to bombing Muslim countries, killing Muslim in millions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Pakistan. They also they also bomb Pakistan, and they have almost in Lebanon, Yemen. There many countries have West
No, yeah,
bomb.
yeah. You're getting facts wrong, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is my perspective. Okay,
No, but you're saying a lot of things that are not factually correct. But go ahead.
but it's just my perspective. Okay, so they kill lot of Muslim, millions of Muslim. So what they happened? The Muslim feel hopeless, totally hopeless. Nothing they can do about it. They are keep bombing one country after another, killing Muslim. Well, they bomb after 2 decades. They bomb just because of 9/11. They bomb Muslim country for 2 decades. What kind of is that? 2 decades, millions of people they kill. So a Muslim became hopeless. So they come up with a new idea to fight the West, and that is dawa. We have to give these people dawa and bring them to Islam. This is how we can
It was
uh,
dawah. I don't know why
defeat these people.
I don't know why you're framing it in the language of dawah all of a sudden. What's dawah got to do with this? It was never considered to be
Yeah, I
dawah.
think dawa, as I explained earlier as well, right? Dawa is a combination of a whole lot of different things, basically. I mean,
Not preaching
not just
Islam, preaching
just
Islam,
this is you. Yeah, that's
inviting people to Islam. This is what means dawah. This is Allah told us in the Quran. If Prophet does not, do dawah, so he did not to do his work. But Muslim never did dawah in 1400 years. They never have anyone organized based on doing dawah to the. We have a tablighi jamaat. They only do is to bring people to Muslim to do the namaz in the masjid, but there is no organization who do dawah to bring people to Islam. So after 9/11, now the Muslim realize we cannot fight these people, we West people. Now we have to do dawah to them and bring their children to Islam. So now they are doing like a jihad, a dawah of jihad, like a dawah doing in the way of jihad. So every Muslim now became a jihadi of dawah. I'm also a jihadi of dawah. I do dawah. My style is different from all other. I do not insult other people's religion. I only try to show what is the Islam. I don't care what their religion have or what they believe. I don't care about. I only show what is Islam teaching, what is the Quran teaches. So this is the only my dawah. Or my dawah is not because I'm going to save them from going to hell. They don't have to believe in Islam to go to paradise. Okay, they can go to paradise without having Islam, adopting Islam. So this is a positive 9/11 bring to Muslim, and Muslim are also reforming themselves, trying to many they are now begin to throw away many hadiths. This is just a beginning. This is beginning of the throwing away many hadiths. If you're going to in the future 50 year, most of hadiths you see this like a prophet married 6-year-old child, and prophet this and that.
um
All this going to throw
Said,
away.
you're going everywhere, man. All right, you're going everywhere. I think you moved so far away from the topic. Anyway, we got your point. Madan, you want to add something to what Saeed has said,
No, I
or
mean,
shall we
I
let
think
him go?
Said, I think I don't know. I think Said is kind of using this moment to kind
In a talking, yeah, in a mood to talk. He's in a mood to talk.
of, yeah.
He
Yeah,
just
yeah,
wants to cover everything, pretty much. Yeah.
But it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
using this post 9/11 events to kind of make himself almost the hero of the story,
yeah.
because every, yeah, everything, because everything Said is saying is
is
congruent with
because
his.
of 9/11. He became a da'i because of
Yeah,
9/11, right?
No,
yeah,
I was, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. Everything Said is saying seems to be resonating with himself here, because you Said are trying to make Islam a bit more reformed, as you said, or progressive, getting rid of discarding certain hadiths and so on. And but so everything that you're saying seems to be about your kind of um, almost heroism of yourself in this kind of climate amongst
No, he's
Muslims.
he- he's thinking. I mean, Said bhai, no offense. He's thinking he's doing heroism, but he's
Mm.
being considered as a heretic by
Yeah.
almost everybody. Almost everybody.
Well,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying. That's what I'm saying. He's trying to extol the virtues of himself here and say that, look, after 9/11, this and this and this and happened is a positive outlook, etc. And all I can say to that is, okay, maybe, I mean, possibly a, a, a reformed Islam might be a lot better than a non-reformed one in many respects, perhaps. But I'm not sure that that is necessarily, there's a direct link between that and 9/11. Perhaps there is. It's difficult to say. The fact that it came after 9/11 doesn't necessarily mean it was because of 9/11, because there's plenty of other things that came after 9/11, including the internet. Yeah, but I maybe loosely you could say that because of the aggressive media focus on Islam after 9/11 with a negative imagery, perhaps had an impact on the consciousness of many Muslims, who then, when ultimately put under pressure, this and being confronted with these hadiths and Quranic scriptures that says X, Y, Z, and they don't find it to be able to reconcile it with a modern day form of morality, they then go ahead and try and reform it. Perhaps you can say that, but my point is you can't definitively say that was the reason, simply because there's so many other things going on. Perhaps 9/11 was a launch pad to that, because without 9/11, maybe you're not going to have that sort of negative um, Islamic
yeah, yeah, yeah. You see,
net and yeah, etc. Go on.
yeah, yeah. Most of the reforming happening in the Saudi Arabia, they reform about the women drivings and mahram requirement. This happened because of 9/11. Okay, if there was no 9/11, Saudi will not be reforming. It was pressure on Saudi government to reform. So that's why they come up with this reformation. Otherwise, without 9/11, there will be no reformation in Saudi government. Okay, this is the pressure put on them. That's why they are reforming. Also, Islamophobia also pressuring Muslim to reform themselves. So this is the pressure upon Muslim. That's why they are willing to reform themselves. Otherwise, Muslim never have reform, and they could have destroy themselves, totally Islam, they could have destroyed Islam itself. So the reforming coming are Muslim because of the pressure from outside, not within Muslim. Okay. And the dawa also is because of the pressure from the West. They have to do dawa to, this is the only way we can fight the West, is doing the dawa, bringing their children to Islam. This is how we can do. And this is, yes, Muslim can do this dawa and they can win in this fight. Like they are trying to, to serve war of civilization, all those nonsense they are talking about. A Muslim can fight back with doing dawa, preaching Islam, and Muslim can win just like a Muslim win in the Meccan. Meccan we win because of dawa. Muslim can also win this war with the West by doing the dawa.
All right, Said, you said a lot of things about Saudi Arabia changing and all those things. I mean, 9/11 might be one of the influencing factors, but not the only one, basically.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was only about, a matter of time when someone like, what's his name, Mohammed bin Salman, like personality came in and kind of tried to, did things a bit differently due to the global environment. Basically, it's the world has become much shorter due to global technologies, global manufacturing, and all those things. Basically, right? A lot of import, export,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
all those things.
what I would ask is to say, if 9/11 didn't happen, do you think the massively massive levels of reformation that you're talking about wouldn't have happened
No,
without,
no,
but for 9/11, none of that would have been happening.
no, it could not happen. No Muslim will try to reform if without the 9/11,
Right.
because there was no pressure for Muslim to reform themselves. Muslim are reforming because of Islam. Look, I can give you the reformation in India, Indian Muslim. You see, Hindu are became a more aggressive, more radicals. They are doing Muslim lot of pressure. They are mob lynching. They are harassing Muslim. They are boycotting Muslim businesses. They are doing lot of mob lynching. All those things. I support those things. I want Hindu to do this kind of stuff, because Muslim not
What
gonna
What are
reform
you
themselves.
saying, man?
Yeah, yes.
Oh,
I'm
you
sure.
want these kind of things to happen?
Yes, I do.
Seriously?
Yes, seriously, because what happened by this pressure, if you pressure Muslim,
You
then
know
they
what?
will reform themselves.
This is only gonna what you're thinking. Probably your thinking is slight bit twisted. The way you're thinking, you're only gonna create a lot more rift between the communities rather than
No, no,
bring
no,
these
no, no,
communities back.
no, no.
I
What
think
gonna happen?
in your
Look.
mind, let me hold on,
Look.
Said. You spoke for a while. Let
Okay,
us talk as well, right?
okay. Go ahead.
Right. So
Sorry.
in your mind, you have thought for some reason giving dawa is the best thing, and that no matter how circumstances become, if that aids to your this fundamental goal of giving dawa, all is good, and that's why you're supporting kind of mob lynching kind of things as well. Basically, I think you have lost it, mate. The only thing I can say, right? Because in your mind, you're thinking if reformation goes through that way, it's still good, but that ain't good because that's going to divide communities even more, right?
Yeah.
So
They
maybe
are.
maybe you haven't thought, maybe you
Saeed,
haven't thought through
the
this
funny thing
properly.
is,
Maybe I would
but
say
funny
go
thing
back,
is,
think through it
Saeed is,
properly.
Saeed is advocating for terrorism in order to reform terrorism.
I mean,
You know,
they are doing in
Exactly.
India. Hindu are doing terrorism against Muslims. I suppose. Look, Muslim Hindu not gonna harm us. They are only gonna injure us. Only injured gonna, but they're not gonna kill us. So I want them to injure us. So our Indian Muslim will reform themselves, become a better Muslim, better Indian, and they will become a self, like a Jew became a self empower. They don't have
Are
anything.
you a sadomasochist?
What? What do you say?
well, Saeed,
Are you
did you say that the Hindus are not going to kill Muslims? They're just going to injure you.
Yeah. They are not gonna. They are gonna injure us, but they are not gonna massacre, kill us. They are gonna injure us only.
but you
So
said you're gonna like it if they injure you, right?
no, Muslim not gonna reform without the pressure from
You're
them.
gonna like it because you'll be able to reform it, right? That's
Yeah.
your
Muslim
implication, right?
leader.
So you're
Yes.
gonna enjoy it basically. That's why I said you're a sadomasochist.
No. Not that. Muslim of India, they are not gonna reform. The imams, the leader of Muslim, Indian Muslim, they are not gonna reform. Only they're gonna reform when Hindu pressure them, harass them, boycott their businesses. They are doing in India. They are openly government doing to boycott the Muslim businesses in India. So what going to happen? Muslim not going to die hungry. They are going to open their own businesses. They are going to open their own education, school, colleges, because of the pressure Hindu are doing to the Muslim. Because of that pressure, if they face, Muslim gonna open their own businesses, job. They're gonna educate their children. So, but without the pressure from Hindu, Muslim not gonna do. They're gonna do all the wrong and destroy themselves.
All right, Said. Said, we're far away from our topic basically, right? We have
Okay, okay,
Where
okay,
were
sir.
we? We were talking about something different, and now we are here, right?
Yes, sir.
See, you made Madan run away as well, pretty much, right?
Oh, no, no, no.
Okay, I think we should close the stream.
Okay, sir.
Anything
Okay.
else you want to talk about?
No, no. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
I
you so
think
much.
I think you went into a very different digression point, basically,
Sorry
right?
about that. I thought you talking about 9/11, so I was.
No, but you from there you took a complete detour. But anyways, right? All right.
All right. Thank you,
Talk to
sir.
you later, huh?
All
I'll
right.
just
Bye
close
bye.
the stream, right?
Okay. Bye bye, sir.
All right. Bye bye. All right, guys. I think Madan just left. We have done the talking about the topic pretty much. I think we could have done more. Maybe we could have done less. Probably we digressed a little bit. In any case, it was just an experiment of a stream. I thought that the number 23 kind of just rang a bell in my head, and I said, okay, let's just think through the event that shifted, that kind of divided the world in two parts, basically, and divided the world in two pretty much. And the ensuing years after 9/11 were pretty different, probably from Islamic world's perspective as well. There were quite a few wars were going on, different things were going on. Uh, in some sense, Muslims were suppressed as well in certain places, especially in Western world, due to what they believe. Most of them, you know, good human beings, good people, and yet because of their faith, they were targeted uh, due to that. And at the same time, there was a rise in, as we saw, that there was a rise in different forms of radical Islam as well. They appeared, then ISIS was formed, and all those things. So yeah, I mean, we just covered everything. There was Arab Spring as well in later parts of 2010, 2011, and all those things. So yeah, anyone who's listening still, uh, thank you very much for joining. We're gonna be here with the next stream, probably, hopefully, much better stream. This was just, we thought we'll just cover it up, and thanks for being here. If you have not subscribed to our English only channel, you can see underneath in the banner, you can see that it's Unveiling Faith, uh, at the rate Unveiling Faith. And if you want to support our work, maybe you can try supporting us through uh, Buy Me a Coffee as well as Patreon. You can support us through super chats as well. So the kind of work we are doing is we are kind of putting, evaluating religious claims rationally and philosophically. I think this has never been done, and this has not been done, at least so far as I think, not been done in the subcontinent. And that's what we are trying to do. And if you think that we are doing something worthwhile, maybe you can support us via all the things that I mentioned: super chats, buying membership, and all those things. And if not, the best thing you can do is comment after the stream is over. Put your thoughts, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want us to cover, and all those things. But in any case, thanks for joining, and see you guys in the next stream. Bye for now.